Recording started. AJ.
Yeah, we should have told it at 5. Okay, you can start recording. Welcome, everyone. This is the Academy Community Center Building Committee meeting. This is a regular meeting, and we would like to start with attendance. And we can start with AJ walking in.
Here.
And
Joe Walker here. And Miller.
Joe Valentine.
Dave Spurley.
Do you know it? Joe Memoranti? Okay, and I do not put the pledge of allegiance in. I don't know if that's gonna get me in trouble, but it just seemed like a way to get directly to public comments. Jeannie, is there anyone on from the public? Okay. First item on the regular meeting agenda is the approval of the minutes from June 27th. I'd like to start by thanking Joan for chairing that meeting. I was out of town on that date.
I would have much rather been where you were. But anyway.
She did a great job.
Thank you.
Very efficient.
Any comments or amendments or edits to the meetings as they were sent out?
I will move to approve. I will second.
All in favor? Oh, no, any other discussion? Anybody else? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous?
Actually, Joe, you need to abstain.
Oh, that's right. I abstained because I wasn't here.
It's good reading though, right?
I did read it. Okay, so we wait for that. The chair comments. I would like to, well, first thank Joan again. That was part of our chair comments, but I would also like to ask Tom to do, instead of waiting under new business presentation and review of schematic design, to do it under QA&M update. That way, I'd like to bring that's a very important part of this meeting, and I'd like to be sure that we get to that. We also have a discussion of the construction manager versus GC, but that will then be put in its regular place. Do I have a motion to do that?
Since it is under new business, you should probably say you want to move 13, item number 13 to after item number 9. And I will make the motion to open the agenda to do that. Second.
Any discussion or objections? Tom, are you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Next, liaison comments, you, Al.
Can't think of any at the moment, but I will think of them before the meeting's over.
Okay. And next is Joan and Ann doing the reviewing the invoice now.
Okay, so we received a total invoices totaling $54,721.28. They are in line with contracts and with the work. So second that, and we'll also come up that the QA&M invoice has been approved by others.
Any discussion? Any questions for them? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's ahead of the QA&M report.
We should shift those up. Maybe we end those with the approvals.
Joan, Ann, are there any budget lines?
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not applicable, move on. Collier's update.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Refer to Tom on the estimates, the discussion that will be coming up shortly. I did distribute the updated milestone schedule. Per John's request at the last meeting, I did include the additional phases on the schedule. However, I did note tentative on those because a lot of this is going to be dependent on proceeding to the DD phase and also the estimates coming out of the DD phase. So right now we have a 3-month window shown for the DD or design development phase, and we have 4 months depicted for the construction documentation phase. That being the case, these dates are accurate as of now, but again, based on the estimate discussion and how we proceed to the next phase, those may move by a week or two or some other time frame, depending on some of the decisions that are being made. I also, I'll talk about the phase 2. So, that's all I have.
Were there any bidders that showed up today? Site review? That was on,
You want me to wait and talk about that?
oh, okay,
It comes up in the agenda, so
Okay,
I was holding off on.
okay, sounds good.
Can I ask you a quick question, schedule wise?
Yes.
The FF&E looks like it's about 9 months, 10 months or 12 months of work. Is that, where's the construction end in FF&E start?
The FF&E design typically, Tom can speak to this as well, will begin, depending on the extent or the scope that's involved. Often that'll begin at the beginning of the construction.
Oh, so there's overlap
There's
between those
overlap,
two
yes.
phases. Oh, okay, that's why the time period, it sounded like a long period of time to do the actual work for FF&E, and that's why I was confused by that.
But in this project, there's not a lot of FF&E, to be honest, so.
That was, yeah.
It may be compressed, but often that is a component that's addressed as construction begins, and then that overlaps. And then obviously the FF&E is typically brought in at the end of the project, so that's why that's being typically designed and selected, purchased during the construction, depending on the duration of construction for a project.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for John? And next would be the QA&M update. And you have the handout, Tom?
I did. So, over the last basically 4 or 5 weeks, we've been working with our estimator with the preliminary estimate for the project. He has had the project for about 3 weeks. He submitted his original estimate to my team internally. We vetted that estimate. We discovered a number of things weren't in alignment, a number of things were in alignment. We had to make some scope changes that he had missed or not picked up on. And then we shifted some scope into the form of add alternates so that they did not reflect the scope. So we wanted to be able to, because we don't have 2 estimates, we wanted to be able to compare our scope of work and our estimate to the original estimate that was provided and scope of work that went to referendum. So we created some add alternates. We had him re-estimate the project. That was about a week's worth of time max. And that was positive, and then the number came down. I did not want to present the first number to you guys. But we now have a full estimate, which is pretty detailed for the schematic level. And I'm going to give you that tonight. We're not going to walk through all of the detail of the estimate. I don't want to do that tonight. There's a lot of information here. There's 30 pages of actual specific detail. However, there's a summary that we'll talk about in the estimate. And then more importantly, I have a comparison of the 2 estimates, which is what I think we're going to spend the most time talking about.
Well, Tom's pointing that out. Our focus tonight is to understand how the estimates differ. There are pluses and minuses in every category. Tom is going to take our discussion tonight and try to begin the value engineering. To see how we can align the estimates, not just for value engineering, but whatever it takes to align the estimates. We will be taking suggestions to that by either to the end of tonight or over the next, between now and the next meeting. A note, just, we're not too on the agenda yet, but what we'd like to do is move the meeting up, the next meeting up by 2 weeks, or by a week, so that we're only 2 weeks apart. But we'll discuss that at the end, we'll have a chance to look at the calendar. So the timeframe on this is go over, you'll understand the different estimates, what's in and what's out. Do some reconciliation for 2 weeks from now, and then come back in 2 weeks and discuss it.
Okay, so in your packet, the very first thing is a 3-page document. It's printed double-sided, it's a lot of paper. This is the estimate summary prepared by Gibbons Estimating Group. And if you open to the second page, what you'll see in the second page is there are the top half of the page are the summaries of all the divisions. So demolition and abatement, concrete, masonry, metals, wooden, plastics. All of those divisions add up to X amount of dollars, approximately. And then if you look down below, you'll see that those are the trade cost numbers. That adds up to $12,084,000. And on the right, you'll see that averages out to about $254 a square foot. And then below that are all of the markups of the estimate. Now, the markups of the estimate include a design and estimating contingency. So at this point in time, it's very common for the estimators to put 7 to 10% estimate contingency on top of their subtrade numbers. Because the drawings are schematic design in nature, while there's a lot of information in there about project scope and direction, there isn't a lot of really highly detailed information. So you can see that that is almost $900,000 in design and estimating contingency. That isn't something that we can adjust or take out at this time. Usually that, as the estimates move on, we get more information in the documents. That estimating contingency comes down, but those dollars shift to hard costs. And then below that, you'll see that there's.
Quick
Yeah.
question. What is the budget for the scope of what's in this system?
We'll
We're
get
getting there?
We'll get there. Wow, you jumped in the gun, you went right to it.
Just wanted to frame a reference.
All right, I want to provide you all the information and then we'll come back and have a discussion.
And just quickly, what I forwarded, emailed, can I email that to Joe? Is that the same thing we're looking at? Because he's online and he doesn't know.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry, Joe.
All good.
So, the markups include insurance, general conditions, contractors, contingency, overhead and profit, building permit fees. And all of those markups are on top of the subtrade number. And we result at a current estimate of $14,900,000 to construct the project, as was originally envisioned in the referendum documentation. Additionally, below that, you'll see this, right below that is alternate number 1, new baseball field. I apologize, that should have been moved to the third page, which has the additional alternates. So relocation of the baseball field is alternate number 1. Alternate number 2, septic system reconstruction of about $200,000. was not envisioned in the original project. Alternate number 3, parking area complete reconstruction was not envisioned. We do have site work in the base bid for the parking area upgrades, but the parking area that we're demonstrating is an expansion of what was originally anticipated in the scope of the work. And then site work improvements, which essentially is the majority of the big landscape patio that we proposed in between the buildings on the west side of the building. Originally included would be a communicating walkway from the front parking lot to the back parking lot, but that's not something that was considered in the original referendum.
And these alternatives are included or not included?
Not included in the 14.9, those are on top. And then there should and will be, as we go through this, an alternate number 5, which is relocation of the playscape. I did not include that number yet because we don't have a design for it yet. I don't have an estimate for it yet, but that is something that Austin has a budget for, and he has funds allocated for it. So, and it was never envisioned as part of the project. So we're including in our project the creation of a pad site that Austin can build his new playscape on.
That's already included, or that?
It is not included in the numbers, but the funding is also not included in the project's funding.
What about
So
the pad, so
the pad site is
We would fund
included. It would be a part of the project.
Okay, and is included in this,
It's included in the alternate number 1, site work improvements and patio. So it's not included in the 14.9 number, but it's relatively low cost.
okay,
So that is the first page. This is the summary. So you have that. We'll continue our discussion.
are you gonna go through the alternates and like what they include for that?
I can and will, yes.
Perfect.
Do you know what the dollar figure was for that's already been for the relocation of the playground?
I don't know what that number is. Austin has that. Austin has the number. So the second packet that you have in your document is a fairly thick packet. It is 30 pages front to back. This is all the backup information of the estimate. So if you wanted to know more than anything else in the world, what makes up, for instance, in the original summary, what makes up item 1900 demolition, you can go into this document and you can see in division 1900 demolition, it's broken up into hazardous materials abatement, 550,000, demo for the building, architectural demo, general demo, miscellaneous demo, flooring demo, concrete demo, masonry demo, steel demolition, and there's a full detail of each page. Now, this is fairly detailed for a schematic design estimate, so there's a good amount of information in here. A design development estimate will likely be 3 to 4 times detailed. That's but this is good. This is a great start. If you go into the drywall section or the specialty flooring section, you'll see square footages and rates that make up this estimate. I have been using Gibbons Associates for 7 to 10 years now. I've had fantastic results with them. As I mentioned in our interview, we find that at the end of the process, our projects have been delivered within about 4% plus or minus to the budgets. They play a big role in that because the information they provide us is very detailed. So as of right now, 14.9 is the number that we have. I have a lot of confidence in that number. That that isn't in alignment with our original estimate. However, we have a lot of information that we can use to get to alignment. So that's for your perusal. The
And I
third,
just want to say that people are going to think, why are we demoing? We need to demo in order to bring it up to code as far as the elevator and things like that. I just wanted to kind of have people understand that, because I'm not sure that everybody gets it.
correct.
On the record.
So we are demolishing, for instance, a small part of the building, a sliver of the classroom. That's where the new the elevator will go. But when we go into the building, there's things that need to be demolished. You could use the word removed or prepped for new construction. In the construction industry, they use the word demolish.
Just one last question, Tom.
Yeah.
Do you have more detailed about these items? Because I was looking at like item 31,000, I didn't see any detail to it.
So the next document in your package is the site work breakout of Division 3100.
Should have
So Gibbons Estimating has the site work done by an outside independent estimator, site work contractor. So that's why it's in a separate format. So this is the backup for the site work component and division, which is division 31. And there's about 7 pages. So the third item is the site work documentation and all the backup for the proposed site development.
Not including alternate though, right?
Yes,
Um,
it includes alternates.
it includes the alternate, so
Okay.
it's difficult to discern. One of the challenges with the alternates is a lot of work is intermingled, in terms of value. So I asked the estimator to break out, the value, the comparative value, the additional value of the alternates, how it relates to the original scope of work. We did have a verbal conversation, that was sort of simple in regards to, well, we were gonna refinish the existing parking area. Now we're building this new parking area. You can see that the new parking area is 40% bigger. We have all new storm drainage under those parts. So it was a narrative provided to him that helped him break the value out. The value of the alternates is an educated guesstimate. So it's very good, but it could go up or down a little bit at this point in time relative to the original value. But it's a good number, it's a good start.
One thing I would add, it looks like it did include the blade equipment surface that was filed into that original.
Into the overall number, it's all there, that's correct.
So, that should be the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll pause while Tom pauses the change papers.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anything you would-
When you say things can go up or down a little bit, is that relative to the cost of there now? So 10% plus or minus, or, you know, if we look at the whole scope and there's a 200,000, you say, well, it doubled to 400. It's only 200K of $15 million. So that's small. So what scale are we using?
What
say?
I meant by that is the alternates are a portion of the total site work estimate. The
Yeah.
total site work number at 1.3 and 1.4 incorporates all the site work. That's how they did the estimate, site work estimate.
As if you were having every alternate.
As if we were doing everything.
Yeah.
Then I asked them to break out the value of these alternates because they weren't in the original scope of the referendum, the RFP. So when he broke it out, those costs are intermingled. So he has to make some educated assessments about, well, how much is, the ball field is easy because it was never there, it's ball field creation.
Right.
However, in the case of, let's say, parking lot creation, he had to make he had to make an assessment of what was the original scope versus what is the new design. So, he did some square footage takeoff and some percentage takeoff. So the value of, let's say, the parking alternate, we're showing it as 205 is what is the difference between the original, what was in the original sort of RFQ and representation of the project. It could be 220, it could be 195. I'm just saying that there's a sort of a value decision
Okay.
that has to be made by the estimator in those regards.
I have a question, the septic system estimate was in there. Where are the wells for the geothermal? Is
The
that in here
geothermal
or is it
wells-
somewhere else?
The geothermal walls are in the HVAC portion of the estimate. And it's in the detail,
In this,
it's in the detail, I didn't find it for you, but. That number was about 350,000, there it is,
Page
Page 23.
page 23, something balance. Oh, the wells, 45 wells at 495 feet and $1 per linear foot is $326,000 for the raw cost for the wells, just drilling of the wells.
so that's in the 14 something, 14.9 million.
That's correct. The fifth document is Town of Madison, Connecticut Academy School Options Renovation. This was the original estimate provided as a part of the feasibility study. So this this shows you where we originally were with the project. The original project, estimated on the bottom of the front page. And so we have to be very clear that we compare construction cost to construction cost. So the original construction budget was $12,180,900. So what we're comparing is 12 million, for the sake of this conversation, $12.2 million versus $14.9 million. So we have a $2.7 million in rounded numbers gap between where the project originally was estimated to where the project currently is estimated. There's also, this is also the full project estimate. It has the construction estimate in it, as well as, meaning as a hard cost, it also has the soft costs in it for your reference. This is something you have, but I put it in this package so you have it readily available for comparison. So the last document.
The full budget that was originally put forward. So you've got construction contingency separate from total construction costs. And there is contingency noted in this estimate. I just want to be sure you all understand what contingency exists and where it exists.
Great. So there are in project planning, there are multiple levels of contingency. The owner's contingency, which is in the original overall project, I'm gonna use the B word, but budget, is a soft cost. It is not a construction cost. It is a contingency that the owner would have. It would be an overarching contingency. It is your project contingency that would apply to the whole project. A design and estimating contingency is a contingency that the estimators will put on a project at this level because they don't have all the information. So what he's basically saying is that this is a really good number, but I'm putting 7% of money on it because based on everything that we know about the project, we think it's a very good chance that there's about 7% of unforeseen items that we haven't estimated and that need to address things that we don't have the information for. That is normal in the estimating process. That is an additional project contingency at this point. It is something that you, me, and everyone in this room would not be able to convince the estimator to give up. So it is secondary contingency, but if you combine the two and you see that we have 12 to 15% of contingency, that is in alignment with what total contingency at schematic design should be. Additionally, you'll see that at the bottom of the estimate summary, which was the very first page that we looked at, at the bottom of the estimate summary, the very first copy. I've got them all in there. Yep, the very first one has 3 pages. At the bottom of the second page in the markup, there's a contractor's contingency of 1.5%. What that means is that depending on which delivery method you have, whether it's a general contractor or it's a construction manager, if it's a construction manager, the construction manager is going to say, I need a contingency of X percentage that I control. That can range anywhere from 1 to 5%, depending on the size of the project. At this point in time, the estimator has carried 1.5% for that. If you deliver the project as a general contractor, any general contractor bidding this project is going to incorporate money for unforeseen items. They're going to factor into their bid a certain amount of, I'll use the word contingency, that's a good word, but they're gonna factor that into their bid. And then ultimately at bid day, they'll decide how much of a contingency or how much are they gonna build into their bid to cover themselves, or based on the amount of information they have, their confidence level, and what their risk tolerance is. So in all this documentation, you're gonna see 3 contingencies. That's the contractor's contingency at 1.5%, which is a viable and accountable contingency. There is a 7% design and estimating contingency that will go away. Ultimately, as we provide more information to the estimator, and that what you'll see is that estimate, that contingency will get smaller as things in the scope grow. So usually it just shifts. And then the owner's contingency, which is a soft cost, that is contingency controlled by the town, by this committee. That is your contingency above and beyond to address lots of factors, not just hard cost overruns, but soft cost.
But in the original thing, had a construction contingency and an owner's project contingency. There were 2 separate ones.
That's correct.
3% each.
That's correct.
So wouldn't the construction one, should that be added into the 12.18?
You can look at it from that perspective. I was just comparing them from a direct hard cost perspective, because we could look at that. You could shift that and bring the gap.
And the owner's side of it should probably sit there and be outside of that scope, right? But I'm just wondering why the construction contingency should be put on that side. It's 300.
I think that's fair. That's a fair comparison. You just reduce the gap from 2.7 to 2.4, which is great. We're making progress. That's what we have to do.
Leaving only 3% contingency on some of Right,
Sure.
that's what we.
But I think 3% outside of that isn't a lot. I'd also point out, and we still have more to talk about, but I'd also point out that this was a good document. It was done at the feasibility phase of the project with very little information about the project, just the concept design. It was an estimate put together on square foot construction costs, and it plugged a number of soft costs. It's a very good starting point for the project. And this is what we have. This is what we have. This is what we have to spend. So this is what we have to work to. And I put this in here because it's our control point as a team and a project manager. So
So above and beyond that, though, the other soft costs were also increased as well.
that's correct.
So project management and architectural fees were significantly over what the original prices were.
The last document that you have is an 11 by 17 page that has some highlighting on it. So, what we really have been trying to find out over the last week is, okay, we know that we have let's say a $2.7 million gap, because that's what we're working with. The numbers that we're talking about in this discussion talk about 2.7. I think you made a good point, Gene. I'm not quite sure that we should do that, but you make a good point. So for today's conversation, let's
For
start
apples,
at 2.7.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to figure out what the difference, where did we go sideways from estimate perspective and scope perspective? There are a lot of things in the estimate that are very easy to evaluate dollars per dollars, apples to apples. So some of the first things you'll see in these columns are site work, geothermal, wells, the abatement work, and demolition work, core and shell work. That scope is very clear in both estimates. We allocated extra core and shell in the first estimate, and we can look and see roofing, windows, siding, masonry restoration. That's core and shell. So those things were easy to identify, as well as the heavy renovation. So the original estimate for the heavy renovations of the building were about 10,000 square feet at $400 a square foot. That was about $4 million worth of work. In today's marketplace, we're seeing those costs at about $450 a square foot. So applied to that same square footage, we're seeing that, okay, we have a $2.7 million gap. About $500,000 of that is just associated with the increase, the square foot cost increase of doing that specific work. That is market apropos. Those are just inflation over the last 2 years. Escalation has been rampant. The original project estimate put together during the feasibility study considered escalation, but in no way, shape, or form was able to imagine or anticipate the incredible amount of escalation we had in the last year. The abatement work was originally budgeted, was estimated at $830,000. We went through the abatement estimate and realized that the abatement work, a lot of the abatement work that was called out doesn't actually have to be executed. For instance, about $200,000 of the work would be to remove all of the mastic or waterproofing on the outside of the perimeter foundation. Well, that work is only required if we're going to demolish the entire building and put it, and remove the building that would have to be treated. Well, we're not doing that, we're removing a very small portion of it. So, coupled with a number of things that we discovered in the estimate that don't have to be accomplished, we're able to bring the abatement work down to approximately $550,000. So there was actually, a net, I don't want to say a savings, but there was a net positive when comparing the two estimates. The geothermal work was originally, the wells were originally budgeted about $750,000. Our estimates came in at about $325,000, so we had a net increase there. And then the site work actually had an increased cost, the base site work, from about $450,000 to about $700,000. So that's associated with escalation, that's about $260,000. But where we found the biggest increase and where we think the estimate was busted is in the light renovation work. So originally, we planned for very low level of renovations in the building. When the feasibility study was done 2 years ago, the presumption was that we could do very light renovation in a lot of the classroom spaces. They were in pretty decent shape. And we budgeted about $40 a square foot at that time to do tenant fit outs, that is finishes and paint, new light fixtures, that type of renovation, and $60 a square foot for MEP, core MEP improvements. But now, we're still budgeting the $40 a square foot for finishes approximately. But we're finding that when we got into the building, that not only has the building, I hate to use the word deteriorated, but there's a lot of windows that have been broken, the building's exposed to moisture, the paint in the entire building is completely peeling off the spaces, everything has to be prepped. Additionally, when the MEP team did their detailed investigation, as I mentioned to you earlier, at an earlier meeting, the MEP team is saying, we need to replace all the infrastructure in the building. There's nothing that can be saved. They don't believe that we can save the plumbing, any of the electrical distribution. And the original feasibility study anticipated reusing some of that infrastructure at $60 a square foot. So now that we're replacing all of that to the tune of $130 a square foot, we have a $70 a square foot bust in the estimate, applied over 37,000 square feet. That's about $2.7 million adjustment. So ultimately, we're only missed the mark in comparing the two estimates is the need to do complete MEP replacement, which wasn't anticipated in the original feasibility study estimate, and the cost associated with that.
Is that confirmed at this point that things like interior plumbing have deteriorated enough from exposure that it's no longer useful?
We have to remove all of the plumbing that's existing and build a whole new core that's handicap accessible. The existing facilities aren't configured in any way, shape, or form to address that. We're locating them in a new stack, and then from the stack, that has to be fully discharged.
So is it design driven then?
It is designed for that full replacement. And that also, in the case of the plumbing, that also includes full septic sanitary replacement.
So it's not the deterioration, it's the design driven changes.
Part of it is design driven, part of it is deterioration. We have cast iron piping that has exceeded its, realistic useful life. Some of it's buried. Some of it, in fairness, we have no access to. So there's a level of presumption here, on the engineer's part. But for the most part, the visual evidence that we have is that it's starting to deteriorate. It's got significant amounts of scaling. We have some pipe cuts, and, you know, pipe this big is now that big. So, and as far as the electrical distribution is concerned, the MEP engineers believe, again, that needs to be redone. I think we need to look at that, but that's my next conversation.
That drives a lot of additional demolition costs. Because you have to be able to get them.
Exactly. So
Any of it, like,
I don't know that information
AKA,
right now. I honestly, I don't know. I have to look back at the hazardous materials assessment. So I just don't. Anyway,
So I just was, if you could define what's the difference between core shell, heavy renovation, light renovation, because it's, for those of us who aren't in the industry, just trying to figure out what falls into the buckets that are kind of in here, unless you can just give me numbers, you know, like that number is definitely part of light and dark.
so the original project estimate was broken out that way. Core shell, heavy renovation, light renovation. Heavy renovation means the areas of the building where essentially we're demoing and rebuilding. It's new construction, at $450 a square foot in today's dollars. Light renovations, the original estimate, the very early iterations of the original estimate had heavy, medium, and light. But I think the estimate that is in this packet had been modified to heavy and light. Light renovations was finishes, upgrades, doors and hardware, lighting, paint, flooring, cleanup. Core and shell means roofing, windows, envelope upgrades, making the shell of the building whole. And then the light renovations had some mechanical improvements in it. The heavy renovations had mechanical improvements built into it. So I have a little bit more in that, I promise. It's your stage. This is a huge amount of information, and that's very positive. So we have a lot of information that we can use to make decisions. This is not abnormal for this type of process. We're very early in the process, and our goal is to get the project headed in the right direction on the right path. So this is the first step, and it's not uncommon for a project at the first step to come in over our original estimates. However, 2.7 is a healthy gap compared to the original budget. It's about 22%. If we were at 10% at this time, I would feel great. I would be like, all right, let's get going. But we're not. So we need to start thinking about value engineering. And what can we do? I hate that term, but it's just industry standard. What can we do to bring the cost of our project closer to alignment with the original budget, so that we can feel confident that we can continue to develop it in alignment with the, with the original estimate. So what I recommend is that over the next 2 weeks, I work behind the scenes with my team. You guys review this information. I'll get some input from the construction industry about, and I'll get input from my consultants. What are things we can do to create value in the project?
Tom, can you identify what are the untouchables?
No,
Things we should not be considering
yeah,
value engineering on?
I can do that. It's, first of all, it's my job to create, all the options that are available so that we can discuss them. Then I will say, well, this is an option, I don't know if I would recommend. But
Well, I'm thinking of things like hazmat abatement.
great,
You have to do. It's,
we don't have a choice, so it's very difficult. That won't
So
be on. the
are there
Probably
other
put it on.
things, are there other things that are in there that if we're gonna start looking for value engineering opportunities, they should not be the first place we, that's,
Yes,
everything is obviously open for discussion, but there's probably areas that you could point to that would be more likely candidates.
correct. So first and foremost, when we go through this process, there are things that have to be executed. Number one, you have to preserve your asset. So the first thing you have to do, no matter what, is roof, windows, show. You have to preserve the asset, because this is a community asset, and it has to be protected, stabilized, so that it can continue to serve the community for 50 to 100 more years. So that work has to be done. Really, we don't have a choice. The second would be the infrastructure upgrades. That would be heating the building, cooling the building, making sure the building meets code and life safety issues. There may be some value engineering options in there that we can look at, but that is the second highest priority. That's a huge number though. It's like $6.5 million of the total scope. And maybe there are opportunities within there or choices. For instance, are we gonna do a geothermal system or are we gonna have a more traditional mechanics? These are hard decisions, but let's identify what the rough order of magnitude of cost is for things like that. And then decide if it makes sense. But either way, you have to be able to meet the building and do so in a responsible, energy efficient way.
So that's like 2.6, it says here, HVAC.
The HVAC alone is like 2.6. There are design decisions that can be made. So our project incorporates things like a nice big clerestory light over the courtyard. I love that, right? That's great. But maybe there's a simpler way we can roof that area and, and make it really special without putting clerestory light in it. Our design is rebuilding the face of the building on Academy Street in that connector. Well, maybe we can leave it the way it currently exists and work with that. Third priority is accessibility. To make this building viable for all the patrons of the community, we still have to make it 100% handicap accessible. I think the elevator in the entrance area isn't something that we can really compromise. However, we may be able to make it more cost effective. Maybe we don't do a full curtain wall. Maybe it's a wall with windows. There are different options to potentially save money. That's something that we have to look at. Finally, the fourth priority, believe it or not, is the function of the program space. So we need to start thinking about the program space that we're providing in the building and what that serves. And that has to be provided so that the community gets use, then gets use of the building. And then, some of the lower hanging fruit that is, a greater target for value engineering are finishes and, some of the more niceties. But there are a lot of things that we absolutely have to do to stabilize this building. So you make a great point that there are things that we just can't cut.
are there opportunities for us to say, we're not gonna do anything with the basement, like it'll be completely sealed off, and like you can eliminate, like, do we need to bring the entire building up, or is there a way to phase aspects of it as well? We could say, we're not gonna do X project right now. Maybe it's roughed in, maybe there's something we can do there to, because this is, the other perspective to me is that this is a way bigger building than the town probably needs. It's 50-something thousand square feet, way bigger than any of the community centers that any of the towns around here have.
So there are things like that that may be options for current savings. And what we try and do is identify work that could easily be done in the future. A good example is our project calls for a full commercial kitchen at the lower level, a training kitchen. That's something we want to have. It's something that could be put in the future. We have the space, we build the infrastructure, and then in the future, if we have funds for it, we could do it. I don't want to use that as an example today. I'm not telling you we're
Yeah.
removing the kitchen. Those are decisions for the community and this committee to decide. But yes, potentially there are portions of the lower level or portions of the main level or portions of the upper level that could be sort of a deferred finish. You still have to do the MEP work, still have to do the windows and the core and shell work, but maybe there's areas that are unfinished from the perspective of, maybe they just have a clean concrete floor and it's been abated and made safe.
We do need to be careful though, because what was approved for the 15.9 was a full building.
I mean, then I'm gonna go back to the town and say, give me 14.9, you want a full building, this is what it's gonna cost.
Having been to the meeting last night, that's not gonna happen, so.
Like that,
No, I think what we-
like the town's gotta also be realistic that we're dealing with real dollars here and.
Yeah.
That
I
we
just
just can't
suggest-
create.
I really
Shouldn't be
do
our
think we have,
first stop.
Shank, I really do think we have to shoot for our goal is 15.9 total, 12.9 construction costs. That is the plan we have to bring forward.
And just to build on that, communities across Connecticut and the Northeast, they deal with this. Budget escalate, market escalation are things that are outside of communities' control. They affect projects, and many projects have an estimated value and they just can't deliver because the cost in the marketplace goes up and they're faced with making hard decisions and trying to wisely parcel out work that could be done in the future without compromising the function of the building and the code and life safety issue.
Right, and the other thing is, we haven't, unlike a school or some other building, there's opportunities for outside funding that aren't grants, that are donations, like if you want your name on this room, this is how much money. If you want to dedicate this space to another thing, go and look to the community for very specific things like that. So that if we call out that, like what you said, those additional potential future projects, if we can see that list and then say, okay, here's the list for the future,
Define the phases.
and then on top of it, potentially even saying, okay, this could be future, but if we get the money now, we can roll it back into the project if we have the money, so to speak. So I think, unlike other types of things, community centers all over the world, quite frankly, you go and this is this, even in the library, this is so-and-so,
Yeah.
thing, this is this
Dedicated
thing and this thing, right?
The gym.
The gym, the stage, the kitchen, things like that, I can see potential for those kind of, naming the beautiful art room, being a naming option as well. So if it's going to have the lettering of the people forever on there, there's a possibility that that's a way to raise the funds. So I think we gotta look at this as like, we've gotta get this thing, like you said, tight, secure, that's the priority, and then hopefully bring out the other things. And that's what, obviously, we need to.
So I do recommend over the next 2 weeks, we start putting together a list of values, engineering options. They're just options, things to discuss. It would be my goal to present those at the next meeting, have discussion, go back, make revisions or adjustments, and make an attempt to get to much closer to the original estimate. Because there's so much uncertainty with the estimate itself, one way or the other, I think if we can get closer to the 12.9 number, then I would recommend you move forward with the design development phase and scope so that we can get more information and get a stronger estimate. Also, at that time, you will be bringing out a second estimator, so we won't be comparing our estimator's work against a prior estimate that was done loosely. We'll have two sets of professional estimating eyes looking at the scope and the work. And we'll go through this process again at that time.
So I guess my first question would be, so we're trying to look at potentially cutting 12%. We're trying to get within 10% of this estimate to our budget.
I
And
think
we should
so.
probably try to target what that number is first.
I think so. I think if we could, if the original estimate was 12.2 and 10% of that is 1.25, let's say, and we have a $2.7 million bust, I think we should be looking for about 1.5 million in value engineering before, this is just my gut. Yeah, I'll follow your direction as a committee. But I think we should get find at least 1.5 that we can, get our hands around and say, okay. Then we'll have a pared down scope that we can detail and get estimated the second time.
So my second question is, so in regard, like, let's just say the HVAC system, he has like a lump sum and then a square footage. So that square footage number is like an estimate of what he's seeing per square foot for HVAC systems. He used like $40 a square foot over the whole building. So that is what kind, is there backup to this? Like what kind of system is that he's proposing? Or what kind of-
Just based on a narrative that was provided by the mechanical engineer to him.
Can we get copies of that? Or-
I can get that to you.
Because it does make a big difference if it's really $30 a square foot and not 40, right? If we're looking at,
Understood. And that's why I'm telling you that there's potentially room in the estimate.
well, that's what I think.
That's why we don't need to that's why I think we need to get 10%.
I agree. I think 1.5 million is attainable if we go through this and go through some of these numbers.
No, he's saying we should drop 1.5, then that money will come out, the money you're talking about where, it was off by $10 per foot.
No,
We'll
I'm
make
just
the
saying,
other
to get
10%.
within 10% of the overall construction costs, we should be able to go through this value engineering out of here and there to get to.
Um,
So you're not saying the estimate's off.
No.
You want to use that to
Well,
get,
Yeah, and to get backup information, because some of the items that he has are lump sum, some are square footage. So like, it'd be nice to know exactly what is in that lump sum number.
It's very difficult at this
No, I
stage
hear
of the
you.
project to put a detailed MEP estimate together. So in the design development phase, the MEP engineers are going to provide more information about what types of units and what types of systems and what types of controls, but it's chicken and the egg. They
No, I
want
understand.
a little.
But they would have contingency built into these numbers too,
Probably.
right? I mean, there's risk involved here. So try to come within
Yes.
the number, right? So then we got risk on top of risk. So I understand what you're saying, because at some point we're gonna define it better, we're gonna get a better number. But where we are today, I think we go through this estimate and find enough items to.
Just so this committee is aware, I've already taken out. The the original number that we received was much higher. So we've been able to pull all of, for lack of a better term, all of the mush into Cypress out of the estimate. But I do think if we can identify $1.5 million of hard, real scope removed from the project, I think that we can also find, some more savings after we detail the project. And the direction, to the MEP team is going to be, all right, we need a way to find some real value in this project. What are some options to reduce, the scope of the system so that we can get in line with that?
I think what you're saying, Tom, is that this isn't the time to try to go from $40 a square foot to $35 a square foot. This would be a time to say it's 40,000, it's 40,000 square feet. And we can, if we eliminate and don't do a section of the building, that takes 5,000 square feet off. And that's a hard savings. So even if we use the $40 a square foot, the real savings would be reducing the number of square feet that would be finished.
I think, that's a hard distinguishable scope. But David also makes a very good point, is that there somewhere's in that MEP number, which is the biggest number of the project, how can we make $130 a square foot be $115 a square foot? Or 120, how can we make that a little bit better number? Because that has a big impact. And I think that's what's gonna help us close the gap between, let's say if we can go from 22% to 10%, and then we can close that from 6 to 4, 10 to 4, then we have a viable chance of making up 4% at bid time.
I think the 1.5, I know you've already done your due diligence,
Yeah.
cut a lot, and found a lot of things, but I think a little bit.
But we've got to identify scope items that add up to the 1 point.
Some of these alternates too, I wonder if they're really alternates, right? Like the septic system reconstruction.
It's not an alternate, but
So shouldn't that 200K be in 14.9?
it will have to be in the project, but
15.1, like that's what I mean, like, do we need to cut more than we're thinking?
we might, but one of the things we talked about at another committee meeting was identifying things that weren't in the original referendum request and scope of the project. It's possible that funding for things that weren't part of the referendum scope that could be easily addressed could potentially come from other pots of dollars.
Okay, so that's why it's,
That was
that's
the
why it's
conversation. I wanted to compare the estimate as close as possible.
Yeah.
So that's why it was isolated. But yes, we have to replace the septic field. There's no ifs, ands, or buts there. And frankly, the parking lot behind the building should be reconfigured and expanded. It really should be done if this wants to be this, state-of-the-art project. The thing about the parking lot, though, is that the parking lot can be done at another time. It
Right.
really could be.
Right.
So, if we can't afford to do the parking lot right now, maybe the programmatic needs for the facility are greater than the parking lot, if the parking lot still functions. So I'm just trying to explain like how the decision-making process could be. And when we identify things for cost saving, the best things to identify are things that can be done in the future. Meaning they don't compromise life safety, but you could always do them in the future.
I've got a couple. So in the spirit of apples and oranges, I'm wondering if there's duplication between the items that in the original 2021 budget for FF&E. Are they for sure not included in this estimate? For example, the $125,000 for kitchen equipment, we've got food service equipment, $1,000.
That's correct. There, you could argue that a small amount of overlap is there because the owner would have an allocation for food equipment. But in this estimate, we're carrying just hard infrastructure. So that's the range hood, the actual hood, the ventilation system, the piping, the drains, the oil water separator. Not necessarily a stove and
Question is, what figure is behind that 35,000?
I'm sure it was just an allowance.
For the
There are energy.
public, Dave Spurley, as a.
Sorry.
So he'll be.
Okay, so there are other categories as well within that,
Correct.
such as data and telephone.
That's correct.
We've got access control. So I'm just wanting to be sure that we're all in agreement as to what is within the construction budget and what is not.
And that it is possible there are overlaps. This is, the original estimate wasn't super detailed. And this estimate has a lot of detail, it makes a lot of presumption. So it's possible there is some saving that are still yet to be found in just numbers overlap and identifying what items are soft costs, what items are hard costs. So that would be good if we identify those. I didn't want to turn tonight into a workshop.
Yeah.
So just so, it's a lot of information. And we have a couple of weeks to really stew on it. And I'm available for questions, during the day or, during the rest of the week. Once you have a chance to look at this, I can opine on things and maybe we'll discover stuff. Anything, any help you guys can provide in helping getting us sort of on track would be awesome.
Second question.
Is that a process question? Do you want to take all comers? Anyone call you, or do you want someone to collect information and then forward to you back to the organization?
I'm okay either way. We're gonna create a consolidated list. And if I get that information from any point, even if it's redundant, I can communicate that way. But if it's easier for you, Joe, or if you'd like to sort of disseminate the information, I'm fine if it comes from you.
I will do it to save your time, save some of your time, which is precious. But if you're willing to, take, ideas as they come across the table, I'm happy to let everybody have direct input. I think that's a better.
I think that would be better as well, because sometimes there's specific questions that might want to be asked from a clarification standpoint. Playing telephone game, sometimes you lose it, so.
It gets burdensome. Go ahead.
Okay, so, this is a scope question. Previous meeting, it was mentioned that the project budget and our mandate is for the building, not for exterior items. I'm wondering where the line is between our mandate and the various things we've been talking about.
So that's a good question. I did receive that clarification. However, and I think the site work is a good place to have a conversation because there is some gray area in the site work. The original concept design showed some improvements to the parking area. And the new design or the sort of the current design shows significant improvements to the parking and walk area. So if everything outside the shell of the building is considered outside the language of the referendum, that's very easy for me because now all of a sudden, all the site work, it's clear cut, it's black and white. Those are pushed into the alternate pile. That's easier for me. Right now, we're trying to prorate a certain amount of the, let's say, parking costs, improvement site work costs into, well, this was originally considered, this is in addition. So it would be a lot cleaner for me if we just push that all into the ad alternates. That would also change the gap to, it would reduce the gap a little bit, not a huge amount, but I think there's like $300,000 or $400,000 difference. So, those are things I would love this committee to discuss, internally and then maybe provide me with some direction.
You said you were providing guidance. What was that? Okay, thanks, already.
Oh, I think Alan mentioned that meeting. I'll throw Alan into the steamroom. And the conversation, there was a conversation about everything sort of outside the perimeter of the building. Meaning the referendum was addressed to the building itself and everything within the building itself. So,
We're still on the same page, Al, that's the case.
Well, this will lead to further discussion another time, but I think the key test is what did we show the public at referendum? And that's what needs to be included at this point in time. If we showed the public a parking lot of this size, and now we think we really need a parking lot of that size, that's clearly an incremental project. We have to deliver what we originally promised the public. That's what needs to be accommodated in this expenditure.
I think things like the playscape prompted this discussion. Because we had a preliminary drawing at one point that had the playscape adjacent to Academy. Now, we have no authority to move the playscape. This committee has no authority over the location of the playscape that the town has, the town provides. So that discussion went to Austin. Where does a playscape belong? Where would you put it? Here's what Academy, what the shell of Academy is going to look like, and do you want to move the playscape there or not? I mean, what is his overall plan for that area? How does the playscape fit? We don't have the authority to say, yeah, move that playscape over there, change the backstop.
So the estimates that we put together have costs associated with those ad alternates, with some of the cost that has been prorated out. So there is some cost in the base estimate for site work, about $700,000 worth. And there is also cost in the base work for parts of some of the other elements. So, like for instance, the geothermal wells. The geothermal wells are actually site work, but geothermal was identified as a part of the original study, was included in the original estimate, and while it's site work, it really needs to be a part of the base scope of work, so it's in the base scope of work. So we've tried to present an estimate within 10%, maybe of the alternates that reflects the scope that was presented at referendum. Things like the baseball field relocation, we have a plug for that. We still need more information about what that baseball field is going to be and what amenities are going for, but that is something that wasn't in the original referendum in any way, shape, or form. And now that is, a completely separate item.
And for clarification for the public, we're not removing any baseball fields, so maybe because this is a very hot topic that goes back decades, okay? We're just reorienting for better safety and for the playscape to be closer potentially to the building, which will allow better safety as well for the children. So I just I don't want that to come out going, no, they're getting rid of the fields now.
So,
Yeah, we're not getting rid of any fields.
Thanks, Joe. The only reason I'm asking is because it's not clear to me what things we're gonna have to pay for and what things we're not gonna have to pay for that come out of other buckets, like you said earlier, so.
Out of those alternates, the only thing you have to do is the septic system.
And that will have to come out of our funds, right?
Well, I don't know, but that's something that has to be done.
If it's done in conjunction with reorienting the fields, and it's the shared cost, or maybe the town picks it up, I think these decisions or these costs aren't going to drive us one way or another. But it is,
It's
in the end,
1,000 cuts though, right? 200K here, 200K there.
in the
Kind of
end,
one gets near $2 million.
yeah. $1 million here, $1 million there, so you have real money.
Yeah.
But it's something that's going to have to be parceled out as we go. Because we don't have any hard costs. We're talking general.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if as we value engineer, we need to value engineer more than we're expecting. Is where I'm sort of driving at, because we know we have to do the septic. We know we're gonna have to pay for it, like, we should value engineer that 200 out, or not, or we say, we think we can make that money up somewhere else, so we're just gonna keep it in the alternate pile. That's the question.
I guess what I'm saying is yes and no, as the answer to your question. I believe we don't have enough information yet to have a really good estimate done. But I believe as your professional, it doesn't make good sense to move to the design development phase of this project until we close the gap a fair amount. So I think we have a 22% bust right now. I think we should get that closer to 10%. That the error of margin of error, excuse me, is easily 10% in the estimate. So I think if we can get to 10%, then by reducing big scope items, then we should move at that point to design development and not look back. Like, for instance, just one example, we're gonna remove the clerestory light from the design, because that might be worth a couple $100,000, it might be worth $300,000. That's hard scope, we can save some money, let's, we have to close a gap, let's just remove it, and let's take the design in that direction. I don't want to remove it, but okay, we have to make some hard choices. If that doesn't affect the operation of life safety or the envelope, that's something we can take out and just move on. So we take out 1.5 approximately of scope, or we put it aside somehow, and then we start doing the design development without those things. We get through the design development phase, and then we're gonna go through this exercise again.
So, pardon me.
See what else we can cut out.
I think ultimately you want to try to make this laundry list as long as possible. So that you have as many of these options and costs to choose from. Because you're gonna say, I want to keep that in, I want to take that out. So you're gonna want to have a figure that's gonna be closer to the $2 to $2.5 million. And from that, ultimately, you're gonna end up hopefully getting to the 1.5 that's gotta come out. And you're gonna have those, options selected from that list. That's gonna get you to that intended bottom line. The town's point of roughly 10% over that existing estimate. And then using that list, whatever you have decided to take out, again, to Tom's point, is now up. Because ultimately, you do not want the architect to proceed with the DD and eventually the CD phase with the potential of, oh, maybe that clear story can come back in later on down the road. You need to, make those decisions as to what is coming out at this stage.
I think there might be two categories. One is we don't fit the kitchen out, but put in the infrastructure. That's something we go back to later. It's a savings now, back to it. The other, take out the elevator, and put that back in, or the skylight. So that's the, it's not an all or none. And that's why Tom keeps answering yes and no.
It's a discussion. We said this early on. working as a team, we have a lot of information. Let's get as much information as we can, make some choices and keep moving forward. But we do have to make some hard decisions to get to a point where we can deliver the project, that's mostly in compliance with what the community needs.
So what is our plan for making that decision then? What's our logistically, how are we coming together as a group to figure out and have that discussion of what's in, what's out, what our potential savings might be? And Tom, we probably need some direction there because it's not as straightforward as saying cut out the square footage and we can save $10 a square foot because there are some sunk costs like sizes of chillers, mechanicals that have to be put in and the equipment costs. So what is our plan for getting to that 10%, 15% we want to save?
So
Next 2 meetings, additional meetings. Tom, are you going off on your own, coming back to us?
So over the next 2 weeks, I will put together a list of items and their rough order of magnitude cost. It will be estimates of what their value is. We pull out the well field for the geothermal, $325,000 saved plus their markup, maybe that's $350,000. We will put a list of stuff together and we will make as complete a list as possible. I will try and distribute that to the committee before next meeting if possible, but I think Joe's trying to move it to a Monday.
It's Monday or Tuesday.
All right, either way.
It's, our plan was for Tuesday meeting, to move the meeting, to bring a meeting up a week. Because at this point, our next meeting would be essentially 3 weeks away. We just left the schedule as it is.
But then we have the following as well, so maybe.
Well, then it's actually 2 weeks later,
Be the 22nd.
the
Yeah.
22nd.
We got the 14th and the 22nd currently.
So we take the 14th.
So my point is, would it be better for you to take those 3 weeks and give us that many more options, or you want to be short?
I think either way is fine. If we meet first in 2 weeks, we'll have a good positive discussion. We'll be able to consider the low hanging fruit, the easy stuff. The first 700 is the easy 700. It's the second 700 that's hard. And then we'll have a positive discussion in 2 weeks. We'll make some adjustments. We'll come up with different places to go. And hopefully by the next meeting on the 22nd, this committee will be able to say, all right, I think we should identify these items. It's approximately 1.5, maybe it's 1.3, maybe it's 1.7. Let's make these adjustments to the scope and let's move forward to the DD phase. So
Good.
We have some time allocated in the schedule for estimate reconciliation. It's not a huge amount, but it's some. This is basically stretching the schedule out by a couple of weeks net, but I think that's fine. It's normal for the process. We don't have a time is of the essence schedule, so I think it's better to spend the time that it takes to get the budget. I'm sorry, I keep saying budget, but the estimate back in alignment with the original estimate, and then we have clear scope, and then we draw the scope. Over that time frame, we can also continue to talk about CM versus GC, and do we need to start getting the cost estimator on board? Because it would be valuable to get the cost estimator or the construction manager on board to work with us through the design development process. Because, construction professionals have a lot of insight into the cost estimates as well. And there's a lot of times they see things that we don't see. Meaning scope that isn't clear cut, scope that is more costly just because the process is more complicated. A lot of times, contractors, construction managers can give us really strong feedback during the value engineering process. So,
So if we could, cut this part of the, put an end to this part of the discussion. The only question I have is how do you want the information if we have some giant revelation? Just send it
call
to,
me, email me. Email me in a lot of ways is the best way because there's a written correspondence, but call me. Everyone has my contact information. Leave me a message. If you don't get me, I'll get back to you.
email would be good if you could, because then you can copy everybody. So if you use email, copy everyone, maybe we can all align and add anything, if not, if you need any, if you want to call time.
And I will keep a consolidated list of ideas and, you know, a rough order of magnitude for each one.
Is it possible to get an electronic copy, just to be able to highlight things like where the high dollar value items in the lists you put together, those types of things?
Yes, but they're all in PDF format, so you'll have to deal with PDF.
Editable copies. Right.
Or,
There's no editable copies, no Word document or Excel spreadsheet.
that's, the comparative estimates in an Excel format, but,
This one.
but that's fine. The other estimates, I'm not privy to digital documents.
And some of these you try to create a with an Excel or a PDF, something like this, and that's what you can get. But there's the ability to PDF to Excel, if you have the ability to get that started.
It's also, at this point, it's very difficult to make estimate comparisons. The next phase of the work, the estimators, so at the end of the design development phase, both estimators are going to be forced to put it into a similar CSI format. So they will have the exact same line items in each estimate. And then you start fighting over where's this money, where's that money. So the next stage of estimate reconciliation is more time consuming, but it's just much more detailed.
Close this item. Up to the
Yes,
page and then I'll-
please.
Thank you, John. The update on environmental, on the RP for environmental impact. I have no update on it. That was, Aaron was doing that. We have an
Yep, I
update.
can provide an update on that. To follow up on Joan's earlier question, we had a site walkthrough yesterday of the facility. We had 5 companies show up. And today at 4 o'clock was the deadline for questions. We received 15 questions. I have forwarded those to Erin, and she will be distributing an addendum tomorrow by the end of the day. There were 2 questions out of those 15 that I was looking for her assistance because they were directed essentially to the town for further information. There are a couple attachments that will go up with that addendum. That addendum will be issued tomorrow, and then the bids are due next month by 4:30.
So, yeah. Believe it or not, I get notifications on all our things. It's just
So
things I signed up for. It's weird.
that's the update.
Any questions? Okay. John, could you give us an update on you had a written update, which I believe everybody was copied on. Anything you'd like to add on the legacy theater in Bradford?
Yeah, I think it was a very worthwhile discussion with them, understanding what some of the issues were that they dealt with as a small theater, both renovation and in program. They provided some significant contacts for us to follow up with, including one that Dr. Bill Stableford about, because he knows that it has Eric Dilner, who has a survey that was done of the town of Madison, Guilford, and Branford a couple of years ago on the appetite for theater and dance and performance in general. So I'll follow up with him and see if we can get a copy of that survey. But the feedback from Keely, was that it's going to reinforce what she got 10 years ago and what we got in our surveys. But it'd be good to see what those details. There were some other additional contacts that she gave us to follow up on. And I'll follow up. So,
Can you do that while you're in California?
Yeah.
Also, there is a contact at Iverton that would be willing to speak to us. It's not something I don't believe we need to do it immediately. So we could do that by Zoom some point in the future. They're pretty tied up. She was, the person that contacted was pretty well tied up.
We'll be back in October. The rest.
The other- Um, the discussion of possible selection of construction manager, and general contractor. We've gone pretty far down detail where we are. I don't know if you want to make that decision now. Is it, anyone have any opinion one way or the other on whether we should vote now or table this to the next meeting?
Sounds like there's not a lot of implication for us picking one of the other right now. So,
No, there's no urgency, to be honest. That decision doesn't need to be made tonight. That's your question.
yeah,
And we had a pretty in-depth discussion last week. It was fairly general consensus. We didn't take a poll at that point, but I think most people would be leaning towards one. So I think if we maybe put it on the next schedule meeting and have a table it for this, I think we do a motion to table until the next meeting. So I can move to table this to the next meeting.
Second. Any further discussion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Um, I did have actually one follow-up question. I have it here in my notes to this discussion on where we could get savings and not. There was at least one indication in last month's notes, the electrical service, ability to order materials, anticipation in advance of what we can, either because of the long lead times and also the long qualification time, Connecticut Light Power. At what point might we be ready to do that?
Oh, not for a long time.
Pardon?
Not for quite a while, meaning, that would be ordered very early on in the construction bid process, or maybe beforehand, if it makes sense and the dollars are available. But it's not a decision that we would make for quite a while, 6 to 8 months.
So that's the ordering. Is there any, if you've been dealing with Eversource, is there a qualification period or a waiting period that, they can't even talk to you for some number of months because they've had those restrictions in the past?
Not that I'm aware of right now. I do know that we tend to consult with Eversource when we're doing our preliminary design. They don't really want to get too involved until contractor actually pulls the request for service. Yeah. So, either way, we will have to talk to Eversource, but now we're not ready for that yet, but it's a good idea. If there is either some savings, one of the thoughts is could we reuse the existing service? But I don't see that, at least that's one of my electrical engineers. So, darn those engineers or something.
You would need to cover that service, which is probably future. John, you could just be able to walk downstairs.
Yeah.
They have
Their office is right
Their
in the
office,
building.
and then they should have a Madison representative. Do you know who that
I do not. Don't directly, yeah.
is?
Usually we
Maybe
leave that
that's
with
gonna-
contractor.
Maybe that's what they're about. Maybe they have a Madison. Contact. That actually takes us to item 14, which is the discussion of moving the August meeting from the 14th, which is 3 weeks from now, to August 8th, which is a Tuesday. Check my calendar. It's probably full, but I suppose we need a motion. I'm supposed to chair our motions.
Is everybody free on the 8th?
That's sort of discussion, 3 on the 8th.
Not as ideal as the 14th.
Yeah, not as ideal as the 14th either, but.
I can count on this. I know that there's some interest to move it up and it saves us some time. In the big picture, I don't think it's the end of the world if we wait till the 14th. I'd rather have as many of you here as possible. But moving it up 2 weeks gets us to a discussion quicker. But I don't think in regards to the overall schedule, it's a make or break deal.
And we're actually only moving up 1 week, but whatever.
The
that
reason
also-
we're not doing the next one is on Monday. 7th.
The 7th to the 8th would be fun. If 7th is better,
I can't do the 7th.
can't do the 7th.
Can't do 7th either.
Well, I mean, I could do the 7th if we can guarantee that we end at 7 o'clock or before.
The other thing about leaving,
Because I'll just go from this room to that room.
the other thing about leaving the meetings where they are is that the August meetings will be 1 week apart.
But, so that's another reason to
So,
to accelerate the first meeting to the 7th to the 8th. And then we'd have another 2-week period to digest it.
Just want to make sure that if it is moved, it's considered a special meeting, correct? Because this has already been noticed. The calendar.
No,
Just wanna
you're,
make
you're
sure.
outside of a week, right?
What? If we move a regular meeting, it becomes a special, I think. So we can't touch the agenda. That's my point. I want to make
So
sure
it would be
anything
officially-
possible is in the agenda.
We will be officially creating a special meeting, canceling the schedule.
Correct. I don't think it's a special meeting because you're beyond the 7 days.
Oh, okay.
Anyone who cannot make the 8th.
Just making
So
Right,
the
make it work.
22nd is not moving or up for debate, right? No, we're staying on.
Right now, it's not.
So we're just moving the 14th to the 8th.
Right, and that way, there's 2 weeks on this meeting and then 2 weeks to the following.
Yeah.
From the 8th to the 22nd.
Is it still going to be hybrid?
We would still plan on being hybrid.
Try and get you this room.
Well, I think that might be why we scheduled it this way.
The reason it's scheduled, it was like, it's the first Monday, second Tuesday or something like that, or second Tuesday, first Monday.
It's the
Second-
second
Second
Tuesday
Monday.
and the fourth Tuesday. And the 1st of August is a Tuesday,
Right.
so that's what's.
And then the Monday is the second Monday, which then becomes. It's because we split Monday and Tuesday, and it's not nothing's 2 weeks apart. It's based on the way the dates fall.
We did that for the Board of Selectmen. Originally, did that kind of screw that. We're insufficiently independent.
There's nothing that they have to vote on.
That's great. So, all in favor of moving the meetings from the 14th, it was the 14th?
14th to the 8th.
14th to
Can
the
we
8th?
know that the 8th is open on the calendar? I just
The
don't
Board of
want-
Selectmen meets that morning. Their zoning board of appeals meets that night, so the room's not available.
The other rooms also booked.
Senior Services Commission is meeting. The Ad hoc Strategic Plan Advisory Committee is meeting, as is the Committee on Community Appearance. I can,
So we have to assume.
We could do that.
in person, I can see if the police department's room is open.
We could do an online meeting that night. If it makes it available for everybody, that's fine. I can put the documents on the screen. We'll be talking about mostly BE items that night. I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that if there's no room available.
Joe, Parisa, you're still, what is your availability? And would you be remote no matter what?
No, I'll be in person. The 14th is easier. The 8th could work.
And it'd be, if it, why don't we leave it, preference to be hybrid? And after that, Zoom. Not in person, is that a reasonable way to put it?
That works.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, all in favor of moving the meeting and using that preference, aye?
I
if you didn't get a second, I'll second.
I think if you, this is the chair, makes a motion, need a second. Needs a second?
Second.
Second, okay, by the time we ask that question, we're
Second,
gonna,
then I.
and second
Second,
that.
aye.
Thank you. Last item on the agenda is our public comments.
Nobody's on.
Scott, to the public, do you want to make a, you've been very patient here.
No, I think it's just so important for us to pay, myself and Austin, to pay attention to what's, how this is developing. And I would just say, I think if, we'll continue to come to these meetings, but if there are things that are gonna, things you're gonna recommend significantly impact, either attendance spaces or I think, what might be programmatically important in the building that we want to be part of that conversation. And thank you, just appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Bet.
I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Adjourn. Second,
Second.
favor?
I